Welcome back to Untaming Masculinity, the podcast where we tackle issues relevant to men and their journeys to reclaim their masculinity. I'm Dan, and as always, I'm joined by my good friend and co-host Brad. What's the word today, man?
Not much, man. It's good Thanksgiving here with the family. We had one at home with just us on Thursday. The next day was with the wife's family. Today is with my family. So it's been a good weekend. I tried to conquer my fear of heights and putting up Christmas lights, and I probably looked like an idiot, like holding on to dear life because I have a pretty decent grade on my ceiling or on my roof. It's like a 10 to 12. And I was petrified that I was going to fall over and die. And then I realized, you know what? I've got good boots. I'm going to be all right. I'm not going anywhere. And I just kind of overcame this fear of heights. I don't know. It was one of those life lessons. But my wife will tell you I looked like an absolute idiot while I was figuring that out. How are you doing?
Yeah, you sent me some pictures. I'm not sure I would have been up on the ladder doing that either.
Oh, no. I was on the roof, man. I didn't forget the ladder. I was up on the roof.
I'm doing pretty good. You know, again, we had a good holiday. We got to break in our new kitchen here with some family, and it's just been a good weekend. We went to a tree lighting in the next town over the other night and went out for a friend's birthday. And it's been nice to have, 3 or 4 days away from work and just spend with the family and really not a whole lot to do.
All right, guys, we're going to do something a little different today. So what we're going to do is, as some of you may have seen on Instagram, Dan had some awesome opportunity to go hunt some man camp. Thought it'd be a really cool conversation to talk about some of the life lessons and some of the principles that he was able to apply those few days out in the wild. What do you think, Dan? How does that sound?
Yeah, it sounds like a great topic, and it's something I can definitely talk a lot about here. So just to provide a little more background here, I am, and I think I mentioned on a previous podcast, but I'm what you call an adult onset hunter. I just started hunting 3 or 4 years ago, right around the time I turned 40. So I'm relatively new to the game, and I had an opportunity this year to go up to a friend's house for opening weekend of rifle season here in New York. Now, for those of you who don't know, on Long Island, we are not allowed to hunt with a rifle. It's too populated. So to rifle hunt anything, you have to go upstate. My friend has a nice 50-acre parcel about 3 hours north of us. We went up there, spent the weekend at a cabin, and had a great time. So rethinking the whole process over the last week or two, there was definitely a lot of takeaways from the situation. I would say one of the biggest ones, and I think I mentioned it to you, Brad, is the concept of integrity. So we were up there with myself, my friend, his son, my friend's stepfather, the stepfather's cousin, and some friends of the stepfather's cousin. I know it gets very confusing. So it was whatever that is, 1, 2, 3, 4, like 7 guys total at camp. I'm not going to get into specifics, but there was some definite gray interpretations of the hunting laws that were used while we were up there. And one of the biggest things that I kind of took away from that is, the concept of integrity and doing the right thing, even in situations where you might not get caught or you might not pay the piper, so to speak, on it. It was definitely a learning experience for me in the sense of dealing with being a guest, first of all, so trying to be like the nice guy, like the polite guest, and then also standing firm in my convictions and not participating in stuff that I don't believe in.
That's a really interesting concept, man. Because if you think about it, you're there with 7 guys. You're there trying to hunt. Obviously the ultimate end game of hunting is try to harvest an animal. And the fact of the matter is, of those 7 guys, who knows how many of them were interested in kind of skirting some laws and choosing to not do things in integrity. And what kind of crazy microcosm that is with life.
Yeah.
How often are we surrounded by guys or other individuals who skirt laws or try to do things, below board? And when you're surrounded with a group of other men, it's really easy to succumb to that and say, you know what? I'm just going to do that. Nobody's going to know. They're doing it too.
Right.
But you've got a foundation that wouldn't have allowed you to do so ethically.
Yep. It's a tough one, and it was definitely one of those situations where there's the rules and then there's, in that particular locale, what's basically socially acceptable. And, it was funny. We showed up and my buddy pulled me and his son, who was about 12 or 13 aside. And he was like, all right, listen, here's the deal. Now that we're up here, I'm going to tell you this. You both took hunter's ed. He goes, we're at so-and-so's cabin. He's like, there's certain things that might occur that might be gray compared to what you learn in hunter's ed. He goes, it's going to be up to you. He looked at me, whether you participate or not. And then he looked at his son. And he goes, we're not going to participate. So there was definite lines drawn right away as to the people who were and were not going to participate in that. What was interesting to me was the people who weren't participating in what I keep referring to as the gray area activities, their justification to those of us who weren't. One of the guys kept telling my friend's son, it's only illegal if you get caught. And it's like, well, it's illegal, and this isn't your kid. So who are you to kind of be pushing these morals on somebody else's child? Like that part, out of all of the things that I saw that weekend, that was the part that bothered me the most.
If you're telling a 13-year-old kid it's only illegal if you get caught, that goes far beyond hunting. That goes far beyond rifle season and a weekend in the woods.
I'll say this: the person who was saying that does not have children, so he doesn't quite. It's not a justification for it at all, but I don't think he understands the long-term implications of a statement like that.
Yeah, that's absolutely somebody who doesn't consider legacy or anything like that. Mm-hmm. It's interesting, though. Like, I think that there's something really powerful in what you were saying earlier about your buddy who pulled you guys aside and said, you're an adult. This is a gray area. It's kind of up to you with what you want to do. But he went to his son and said, you will not do this. We will not do this. The message that he sent his son right there, it's like, here's what they are. This is not who we are. This is not who we do. Right. Or this is not what we do, rather. Like, that's really powerful, man.
Yeah, it was. It was actually a powerful moment for me because it made me see my friend in a light that I had never seen him in before. Not that I think he's a bad guy. I think exactly the opposite. I think he's a great guy. But it kind of solidified that and like, okay, now I know where you really stand on certain things. And he was very forceful in it. Like he wasn't a jerk to his son or mean or anything like that, but there was no qualms about what is and is not accepted, regardless of what other people say. So it was pretty powerful, and it kind of rolls into the concept also that I took away from this trip was the idea of like a coming of age process or a legacy process in terms of right. We had 3 generations of a family there. We had the grandfather, the stepson, and then the son, and I got to see how the boy, and I'm trying not to use names just to. I don't know why, but I'm just not going to use him. I got to see how the boy was kind of slowly brought into the realm of being accepted within the group of men by the way he acted, by the things he did, by the things he didn't do, and how over the weekend more responsibility and more respect was bestowed on him because of those actions. And it's also, I got to see also how the actions of his father resulted in the actions and the performance of the son. It was a really cool thing to see. And then to have the senior, the stepfather or the grandfather involved in that process, it was really cool to see the complete dynamic from start to finish.
That's awesome. You think of rites of passage, and here's a boy who had 2 generations, his father, his grandfather, and they're all out there doing the same thing. Searching, really building a tradition that one day he could ideally pass down to his son.
Yeah, it was really cool, and it kind of hit me a little bit too because one morning, so we went up Friday afternoon. We went up Friday morning. We got out hunting Friday afternoon for the last day of archery season, and then gun season started Saturday morning. So we sat Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and then Sunday morning, and then drove home Sunday morning, it was just me and my friend. Everyone else stayed in the cabin because it was bitterly cold all weekend. I mean, we got skunked. There was nothing but coyote and bear prints all over the mountain. It was snowing. It was just not fun snow, like miserably cold blowing snow.
Yeah. See how that goes, right?
But Sunday morning, as we're driving up to the mountain, my buddy looks at me. He goes something to the effect of, I'm really happy that I was able to share this with you and my son at the same time and show him the value of not only family, but good friends who can share in these moments with you, and the importance of having solid male companions in life. Something along those lines. It probably wasn't that. Probably wasn't said just like that, but that was the extent of the message, and it really hit home in that as men, we're the ones setting the example for our kids and for our sons specifically about how we treat people, how we perform within groups, and how we need the companionship of other men to both push us and to get us really just improving in life.
Yeah. I mean, how often have we talked about this throughout all of our various episodes? Men need other men. We need a tribe. We need a pack. We need our band of brothers. And what's so cool about this story and so cool about what you're sharing is, this is a group of men. There's a family element there with multiple generations. There's groups of men who are friends, who have different associations. And throughout all of that, on one hand, you're seeing some of the things you should not do, things you shouldn't, strive for. But on the other hand, you're seeing incredible examples of what you should do. And it just goes to show that in life, as we're navigating through things as men, we have a choice. We can either be drawn to some of the gray area, some of the poor choices, if you will, or we can make the choice to find ourselves in the companionship and alongside men that help us strive to be better. And that's such a cool juxtaposition that you got to experience that in miserable, horrible, windy, cold, wet snow, in miserable circumstances. You still had an opportunity to see men perform at their best and set examples for those around them.
That's the cool thing too about this whole trip was, right, I came off talking about the integrity part of the trip, but overall, it was an incredible time just to be around a group of men. And I think it's also powerful for us as men to be around different groups throughout our life, right? So this was a group of men who I knew my friend, obviously. I knew his son fairly well. I'd met his stepdad, but the rest of the crew I was all brand new to. And I was doing something that I was relatively new at. But just to get away for a weekend with just a group of guys, and we got to be outside, do hard things. We were out in tough weather. I got to drive my truck up the side of a mountain on a rugged road, dropping into 4-wheel drive low and using it the way God intended trucks to be used, not just driving around the highway here on Long Island. We got to shoot guns. We shot bow and arrows. We broke bread together, and it was just this real awesome bonding experience between a group of guys who, some of us knew each other and some of us didn't, but we all had a common bond in the sense that we were out hunting, we were out trying to put food in the freezer, we were out trying to provide for our families. And hunting ethics aside, there was a real unity in our purpose there, and that provided us with the ability to bond. And like you said, guys bond over hard things. So yeah, the weather sucked, and I'm probably tighter with my buddy now than I was, because he and I, out of the entire group, made no excuses about getting out there every possible morning and every possible afternoon to sit and hunt.
Yeah.
Weather was not going to be something that made us sit inside. Everyone else bailed at certain points. We got out every single time and had fun every single time, regardless of the fact that we didn't see a thing.
Yeah.
But it's in those hard things that you remember what it's like to be a man. And he even said, he's not completely, I won't even say completely, he's not really involved in this kind of mindset or this movement yet. I'm trying to kind of push him in the direction with still kind of making it his decision. But he even said to me, as a guy he's closing in on 50, he goes, man, sometimes it's nice to just prove that you still got it. He goes, that you can still do it. It's nice to get out there and do hard things just for the sake of doing hard things, for no other reason than just to be able to say, I did that. And there's power in that. There's power in being, we went out Sunday morning. This is going to be our last sit. And we decided Saturday morning was a crap show. Everyone woke up late, or I should say everyone else woke up late, and we didn't get out in the mountain. I didn't get in my stand until about 7:30, which is late. First light had come and gone. And we decided that Sunday morning, since it was only going to be us, that we were going to get up early, get out there in the dark. Now, we had seen coyote and, more importantly, bear prints all over the mountain. And I'm talking like a mom a sow and her cubs, and a big male walking around in different areas. So, typically he and I are of the mindset that we're going to put rounds in our rifle, but we're not going to put anything in the chamber until we get to the stand, just as a matter of safety for walking. Well, we each took about 5 steps away from the truck in the pitch dark, and it was like we both remembered that there was a big bear walking around the mountain at the same time, and you just hear both of us chamber around to keep walking. But what I'm getting at there is it's those hard things, those things that you're not used to doing, that remind you that you're a man sometimes. It reminds you that, I'm sitting there going, I'm out here in the wilderness, in the dark. There's a predator walking around that could theoretically rip me, stem from stern. And I'm still going to just go out, walk to my stand, and hope to put meat in the freezer because that's who I am and that's what I do. And it's, I don't say that to make it sound like I'm tough or anything, because I'm not. But there's a certain moment when you do stuff like that helps you. I'm going to hate this term as soon as it comes out of my mouth, but confirm your masculinity.
No, that's awesome. Because before you'd kind of gone down that road, there was a question I wanted to ask you, and that is, although you were afraid and you had some fear and trepidation when you see these, these Papa Bear tracks around you, there's sign of a large, I would assume black bear, based on where you are. And were you scared? Yeah. But did that stop you? No. And that's empowering. Like, here's probably a question for you, I guess I could ask. Did you take a second after you saw the sign? You're like, oh shit, there's potentially a big brown bear or big black bear around here, rather. But that didn't stop me from hunting. That didn't stop me from getting up in my stand. Did you take a second to reflect on that after the fact?
Yeah. So first, let me back up and say, I think I was more scared of the mama bear in that I would get between her and her cub.
True. Good point.
I've been on a lot of trips on the East Coast and the Northeast. Black bears are not, I don't want to mess with one, but they really don't want to mess with you either. They're not like,
they don't.
They're not like the bears out your way.
Right.
It's,
but they will if they have to.
Unless you're between them and their cubs or them and food, they're pretty much not going to bother you. But once I got to my stand and I'm kind of looking over the land and watching the sun rise over the mountain, I kind of had this moment of, I'm doing this. Like I'm out here. I am doing something that is dangerous, and by all accounts, the people at home who I hang out with would think would be almost stupid in the sense of the risk that I'm putting myself at. But at the same time, I've decided that I am capable enough as a man to be out here and to make the right decisions to protect myself and still hopefully provide for my family. So it was kind of I'm doing a horrible job of explaining it, but it was a really cool moment to just be sitting there and being like, this is a pretty cool moment for me. Like this feels like I've actually, I don't want to say accomplished something, but I've been able to put the fear aside and do something that I have never done before in my life.
Yeah, it's empowering. And if you go back to our episode, it's probably been a few months now, when we talked about doing hard things and dangerous things. It helps you feel alive.
Yeah.
There's something absolutely empowering and almost intoxicating about this concept of, I did something real scary. Potentially there's a mama bear out there who's going to take a bite out of my neck, but I'm still here and it's awesome.
There's a certain level of fear that's good for you. And there's a certain level of type 2 fun that you experience when you get into situations like that. Like, listen, I did not want to get up Sunday morning. It was cold. It was, by the time I got back to the truck and the sun had risen, it was 18 degrees. So I forgot to look before we left out, but I was on the west side of the mountain in a valley, like 500 feet or so below my truck. We had parked at basically the top of the mountain when we drove up the access road. It was snowing. There was a field off to my right that the wind was just blowing off of and ripping through me. So, I mean, I'm sure that the wind chill was at 0 or below 0 for most of the morning I was there. It was cold. It was miserable. I didn't see a damn thing. And you were just kind of like counting the minutes until you could get out of the stand, because it was just, I ended up having to get out of the stand about half hour before we said we were going to leave. And I just started to do a little bit of stalking because my feet were so frozen that I just had to move. But I look back on that now, that miserable experience, that miserable physical experience. I look back on that now, and that's something I will remember for the rest of my life as like a great first deer camp.
Yeah. It takes me back to our interview we did with Sam a couple months ago, and
Yep.
how he talked about how miserable
Yeah.
it can be because it's hard. Hunting's not easy.
It's
It's a
not
difficult
easy at
thing.
all. It's not easy at all. It's, and especially, I think I can't begin to describe what, a Western hunt's like, but when you're walking to a deer stand and you're just kind of like winging a prayer, hoping that you get the wind right, you've got the temperature right, that, you figured out the stand is in the right place between the bedding and the feeding and it's the right time of year and all this stuff. It's a guessing game, and you're constantly second guessing yourself. You do a Western hunt was a little bit more spot and stock. At least there's some feedback as to, okay, we're not in the right spot. Let's move to that ridge, glass, see if we got something. I'm not saying it's easier by any stretch of the imagination. It's not.
It's
But
different.
just sitting still and hoping that something walks by is the most frustrating thing in the world. Because all I'm thinking about the entire time is I'm not doing anything to up my chances here. I'm
Yeah.
literally just sitting here praying that something decides to be dumb enough to walk through within range of me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is a dumb question because I don't necessarily understand how hunting works back east where you're sitting in a stand. Are you in dense enough forest that your range of vision is 100 yards every direction?
Yeah, so it depends on the forest that you're in. A lot of forests on the East Coast are what you would call new growth, meaning that the trees aren't that big. They've been harvested, and like my buddy, the way they actually pay the taxes on the land is they let a timber company come in and harvest trees. So every 5 years or so, they're cutting down a lot of their bigger trees, and then little trees are popping up. So there's a lot of stuff in the, I'd say, 6 inch to 18 inch range, and not a lot of 36-inch diameter plus trees. What I'm getting at is, yeah, I get up in a stand. I've probably got 100 yards tops before it gets to be too brushy and too overgrown to really make a shot. And you clear shooting lanes and stuff like that in the spring and the summer. But it's not like up by you where you can be sitting on a ridge and see 400, 500, 600 yards. It just doesn't happen.
Because that's interesting. Because coming back to that is there is some luck involved in that. You have to pick the right spot and hope that a deer comes within 100 yards in either direction of you.
Yeah, you got to find, like I said, you got to find where the bedding is, you got to find where the
Yeah.
feeding area is, where the water is, and then try and figure out the paths in between and kind of set up on those, but off them enough that you're not disturbing them. And then it's a game of thermals and wind as well. It's a rabbit hole, man. And as an engineer, like, we've got our friend Andy, who's a big hunter in PA, and he's loving life because he's just feeding me information bit by bit and getting me really hooked on it. So it's really cool though.
So did you have an opportunity to go up and scout his parcel before you guys all went up there?
About 2 years ago, so the year before COVID hit, we went up there for spring turkey season. So I kind of knew the lay of the land just from hiking around up there. And in spring turkey in New York, you can only hunt until noon. So we spent a lot of the time up there just walking around the land, checking out the stands, doing a little repair work here and there. So I kind of knew where I was. The particular stand I was in, I knew where it was. I didn't know exactly how everything traveled there. But according to my buddy, a lot of people had taken some pretty good deer on that side. So I went down there. I also volunteered to go down there because it's the coldest side of the mountain and I was the new guy. I figured that was kind of respectful thing to do,
So you rite of passage right there. Man. So here's always the big question. Obviously, as a new hunter, you're learning the process. And for somebody who obviously you want to go out there, not only learn the process, you'd love to be able to see something, harvest an animal. Maybe talk to me a little bit about kind of how you felt mentally when you didn't see anything the entire time you were there.
The initial reaction is frustrated. I mean, I wouldn't believe anyone else who told you otherwise. If you go on a hunting trip and you drive 3 hours from home or more, you want to at least see something. Now, I saw a bunch of deer on the trip. They just were nowhere near my stand. They were all over the road. They were all over other property that we visited and stuff like that. So they were there. And it was really cool to see. I saw, a couple of really big, like I saw one 10-point buck when we were passing by, a couple of other big does, a couple of big 6-point bucks. So it was cool to see that. It's frustrating when you go in, but I've really had a mind shift change since I started hunting a few years ago where, when I started 2 or 3 years ago, I'd go to the shotgun season down here. I'd go out for turkey, and it was just like, let me go in the woods and something comes my way. Great. The last 2 years, for whatever reason, or the last year and a half, I've really resigned myself to the fact of I'm not doing myself any favors by just showing up. Yeah, I might get lucky, but I'm not doing anything that puts the odds in my favor. So I've really kind of put myself in the mindset of, okay, what can I learn from this trip? Right? Yeah, if I stumble across something, great. But to use a phrase from a guy in the IC, I want to finish my failure on these hunts. I really kind of went in and started thinking about what I did on this hunt that was detrimental to the outcome. And I definitely did things that were detrimental to the outcome. I don't think I was very good with scent control. I think that's a place where I can improve. Right? It's not something I've been very conscious of, so it's something I gotta work on. I gotta work on. I basically marched right to the stand. It didn't take some kind of circuitous route based on the wind and based on where I thought the animals were coming from. So that's it. Learning when to and when not to hunt. We were up there for a specific amount of time, so we were going to go hunting regardless. I mean, we hunted the entire weekend, and we had about 1.5 to 2 inches of just crunchy, icy snow. So every step was just like, hey, we're here. We want to shoot you. and it didn't matter whether you walk slow or fast or soft or medium, or you're just making a hell of a lot of noise. So there's a lot of things I learned. I learned about my gear. I learned about what I need in my pack and what I don't. Like I mentioned before, with the wind, like I start to really pay attention to wind and how it affects my scent and where animals should be coming from and how to plan for that accordingly. So what I'm getting at is, I was very frustrated that I didn't put meat in the freezer, but it was like taking a college level hunting class in terms of everything I was able to take away from it. And now I can start to impart that wisdom into future trips. So I'm already looking forward to, we're going up for the last day of rifle season here, not next weekend, but the weekend after. We're just going to do a quick up and back. And I've already got a couple of ideas on how to improve my chances on that trip. Doesn't mean I'm going to put anything in the freezer. And I'm also managing my expectations by not expecting to be successful on trips, at least for now, and just learning.
See, that's awesome. And you got to think in your engineer mind, think of iteration. Here's your opportunity to iterate and to get better and to improve.
Yeah.
And it's drawn to this whole concept of process over results. You are establishing a foundation. There's a lot of what you said that I was incredibly fascinated by. Because, while that applies to hunting, that applies to every other element of life. If we don't get the foundation right, every once in a while we're going to get lucky. Something crazy is going to happen. You might show up in a tree stand and then, oh, hey, a buck walks right under your tree.
Right.
Easy. That's rarely going to happen. And for the people who maybe have that initial luck, they might not necessarily spend the time to build that adequate foundation to truly be successful, to really think about every possible outcome, to think about scent, to think about how you can best prepare yourself every step of the way. That's a microcosm of life. If we don't spend the time to really establish a foundation, and if we hope to just get lucky, catch fire in a bottle, invariably at the end, we're going to fail.
It was the conversation with Dylan that we had that really kind of changed my mindset on failure. He had a quote, and I'm going to butcher it like hell, but he said something to the effect of, failure isn't the end, it's the beginning of my ability to learn, or something to that effect. And I just completely hacked that. Sorry, Dylan. But I really took that to heart, and it's kind of changed the way I've approached life since that conversation, in the sense that I don't get upset over failure nearly as much as I do. Believe me, I'm very frustrated that I don't have, I didn't get something on this trip and I wasn't able to put meat in the freezer. That I'd be lying if I said otherwise. But I'm able now to kind of take that step back and really use that mentality that he provided us with as a stepping stone for, okay, well, I obviously didn't show up the right way in this situation. How do I show up the right way the next time the situation is presented to me? And how do I get ready for that? And what do I learn from this? How do I pack my bag differently? How do I walk differently in the woods? How do I show up at the right time, and that's all hunting specific, but you can do that with your marriage. You can do that with your job. You can do that with your kids. Take that failure and use it as a tool to AAR it and figure out how you show up better the next time as a man.
We fail fast. We fail forward.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen is those lessons you took away, when you go back up there the next weekend following next, those things are going to be in the back of your mind.
Oh yeah.
Those are things you're going to be able to build upon. And that's what it's all about, is we have to be willing to do an AAR. What did we do well? And especially, what did we not do so well? Where did we fail? We talk a lot about failure. There's absolutely nothing wrong with failing, as long as you allow it to, just like Dylan said, fail fast, fail forward. Said one other thing that's not coming to me. As we do those things, we'll learn. And I'll tell you what, man, the time is going to come, whether it's this season, whether it's next season, whatever that looks like, you're going to harvest a buck. It's going to happen.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the work you're doing now.
I'm completely convinced that will happen. And I'm completely convinced that it'll be a result of the outcome of my failures that gets me there. And that sounds really weird to say it that way, but it's you think about a kid learning baseball. He doesn't hit the ball because he's successful. He hit the ball because he failed so many times before that, and he did micro adjustments to put the bat on the ball, right? Or the kid who learns how to throw football. He doesn't throw a spiral right away. He throws his wobbly, craptacular throw, and eventually it turns into a spiral. And it's because every time you failed, you take a little bit of feedback from that failure and you implement it into your next attempt. And then you refine it again, and then you refine it again, and you refine it again until all of a sudden, holy shit, I did something right. And it's because I learned all these ways to not do it right, and I adjusted from that.
Yeah. It reminds me, I swear, that almost every episode, you and I find a way to either talk about hunting or jiu-jitsu.
Yep.
Because there's so much failure involved in both. And it's through failure that we grow. I really like that baseball analogy. I feel like we talked about Tony Gwynn before, and I feel like we've talked about baseball several times. Yep. Baseball is a really interesting example because even some of the greatest hitters of all time, you think of the Tony Gwynns, you think of the Ted Williams.
You think about Ted Williams. Ted Williams is idolized because he had a 400 season.
Yeah. He's the last man to hit 400.
That means that he got a hit 40% of the time. That means he failed 60% of the time. Yeah. And people think that's terrific. That puts the game of baseball in perspective in the sense of it is a game of lots of failures and minimal success, but you keep going after it and you keep refining the process on all those failures. And maybe you'll get to the point where you fail just a little bit more than you succeed, and people will think you're a success.
Yeah. There's a lot of powerful lessons in that, man. This has been a cool conversation because I know you've been really itching to get out there for a long time, to really spend some time, in the woods, going hunting. Like, you've been itching for this for years.
Oh yeah, dude.
And, seeing how excited you were for it, and invariably, not only recognizing, I didn't come home with anything, but here are the incredible lessons that I've learned. It's like, this is a pretty good conversation that needs to be had. Because I encourage the men as they're listening to this, while these are things where we're talking about sitting in a tree stand in the woods, think about how these various things can apply to your life. Failing, going through suffering, having integrity. Some really powerful concepts that can be applied anywhere.
Absolutely. So, the other thing I'll say, and I meant to bring this up earlier, but I just kind of want to make note of it too, is one of the other big takeaways was the ability to be with yourself by yourself for an extended period of time. I sat in this tree stand, and the side of the mountain I was on had no cell reception. So I'm just sitting there and I'm just watching nature. And I was forced to be in my own head by myself, just observing things as they came. And it's amazing how uncomfortable that is at first. But over 1, 2, 3, 4 sits, Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, Sunday morning, I actually got very comfortable with it and actually found it to be peaceful by the end, to the point where I enjoyed that moment, that tranquility of just being by myself, being quiet, and being able to just let my mind wander and let things process on their own.
Yeah. You didn't need to check your phone every few minutes. You didn't need to be entertained. Yep. This concept of allowing yourself really to be bored and being able it's a cool concept, man.
We're in such an instant gratification society at the moment with cell phones and social media and all this, that it was I'll admit, it was very, very, very uncomfortable the first couple of times I was there. But by the end, I craved it almost, and I find myself now craving it even at home, and fighting that battle of having to put the phone down or having to, just turn off the outside world every once in a while. I went on here's the ultimate wrap up to this conversation. I went on a hike Thanksgiving morning with my daughter, and we're hiking around a state park here on Long Island, and we actually found an old cemetery. But I did the whole hike without my phone on purpose. Like, I just wanted to be present with my daughter. It was just good conversation by ourselves. I kind of made sure that she knew I didn't want her to have her phone out too. We were just chilling. So we found this old cemetery, and it was the coolest thing to have a conversation with her about the people who were buried there. I mean, we're talking like early 1800s to early to mid 1900s. I think the earliest stone we saw was like 1812, and then the latest death was like 1950. But it was in an area of the woods that was completely overgrown. It was obviously somebody's like family lot that they had used, when they first started to settle here, and then they sold land, and it just kind of got, forgotten about. But we're sitting there talking, and to wrap it all up, I hear a rustle in the woods. I look up, and this big fat 6-pointer comes just strolling by at 40 yards, and it was kind of the ultimate, middle finger to me. But it had me laughing the entire time, because it was just, I'm sitting here. I finally got comfortable being by myself and being, present in the moment and not paying attention to what's going on around me and not hoping for anything. And then it just comes by and goes, "Oh yeah, remember me? I was what you were looking for a couple weeks ago."
So, the giant FU middle finger.
But it was an awesome moment, because my daughter and I just sat there and watched this beautiful creature for a minute and a half as he just walked by and just grazed. And we were talking like you and I are talking right now. He didn't even look at us. He just kept moseying on, eating whatever was on the ground, enjoying life. To be present in that moment enough and not have to be dug into your phone or whatever. That's what caused me to even hear the rustle of leaves at first, or to be in that cemetery looking. It could have just been like, all right, I want to get this hike in, get moving and get back and get Thanksgiving dinner in me. But it was just like, let's go off the path a little bit, check out this little cool place that we've heard about but we had never been to, on a trail that we had hiked 100 times before. And just being present in the moment is what got us that beautiful moment on Thanksgiving morning, where I got to spend with just me and my daughter. We're the only people in the world who were there in that moment. So I know this is kind of like a long, convoluted wrap up to the idea of just being present and being by yourself, but I do believe that those moments are given to you when you truly just kind of invest in yourself and invest in the people that you're with.
Yeah, that's a really good way to wrap it, because that's absolutely what it's all about. Is as you put the phone away, as you put those distractions down, you're much more situationally aware, and oftentimes you never know what you find. So
yeah, it was a really cool moment.
Yeah. Cool, man.
Well, thanks,
good,
man.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. This was a good conversation. It was fun to kind of recap that trip. I'm looking forward to more of them, and I'm looking forward to you getting your butt in gear and maybe coming out west and going hunting with you at some point. So
yeah, buddy. Yeah, that's the goal. I'm saving my pennies. I got to get some boots first, and then we'll go from there. Cool.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. I just want to thank the fellas for listening. I hope you guys all had a great Thanksgiving. I know that we definitely had one. As we head into the holiday season, I just hope that all the guys are able to spend some time with their family and friends and really enjoy their time as we wind down the year. But at the same time, right, we're winding down the year. That just means that we're heading towards a new year. So it's time to really start to think about what that means for you and where you see yourself going. With that in mind, we want to thank everyone for listening. We want you to all check us out at untamingmasculinity.com. You can find show notes to this episode and all of our other episodes, as well as links to our social media. We've been really trying to up our game on social media lately with some pretty good results. So please check us out there and definitely interact with us. We love when people like our posts, and we love it even more when people respond and we get to have good conversations with our listeners. Definitely check us out there. If you found value here, we ask that you leave a rating and review. It's those ratings and reviews that really let us get the word out to other men and help us spread this word. So please do that. If you do that as well, take a screenshot, share it on social media. That way we can interact with you and thank you. And finally, just make sure you come back next week. We're going to have more great content coming your way. Brad and I are back at it after a crazy week last week that we weren't able to get an episode done. So we're going to be here with more content for you. We got a couple of interviews lined up here that we're really excited about and we're looking forward to. So definitely come back. And until then, we'll leave you with just one question. What are you doing to untame your masculinity?